say here at Occulture, I thought, I'll just go straight for it. I'm just going to start at the end. I'm going to go for death. Brilliant. And it got me I've been thinking about death an awful lot throughout my entire existence, because one does. And as I get nearer to it, it becomes more important in some ways, and also less important in others. So this is kind of what this talk is about. I'd like to start with a quote, because that's always nice to do. Breathing gently, people enjoy their slumber. But between one breath and the next, there is no guarantee that death will not slip in. To wake up in good health is an event which truly deserves to be considered miraculous, yet we take it completely for granted. So some of what I'm going to be talking about today, and hopefully getting you to think about, is the way that death can focus our minds on life. And my talk isn't going to be about death and then what comes afterwards, because to me that's territory which I can guess about. I can hear stories from other people a little bit, but it's a bit more nebulous. So I'm going to address the other side of the moment of death, which is the bit as we approach death. So rather than death, what lies beyond, which has been the focus of an awful lot of conjecture from the main religions for a couple of thousand years at least, I'm going to be asking the other question, which is death, what lies before that? What happens before we die? So one of the things that happens is that as we age, our body changes. The archetypes of maiden, mother and crone are known to us and used by many people in practices today. And the crone archetype is a useful one for women who are of a certain age. As we approach menopause and the change of our sort of biological functioning, other things happen, our hormones change, all sorts of things go on. This doesn't happen in the same way for men, although obviously they have their own changes as they age as well. But rather than just look at those particular archetypes, I'm going to try and do things which are accessible for everybody. So as we age, we accumulate stuff. We accumulate wounds, we accumulate the effects of injuries that have happened to us. I walked into a door like nearly 30 years ago now with my knee, and it still hurts occasionally from that one incident because it damaged the ligament there. And I do what I can to strengthen it. I did yoga exercises for ages to strengthen the muscles around it. So we accumulate those wounds, but then we can also accumulate practices to deal with those. And as magicians, we should be aware enough to be able to balance those things up a little bit, hopefully. So some of you will have seen me just now over there in the corner doing some Tai Chi Warm-Up Exercises. I've started to do Tai Chi rather than yoga recently because yoga has become too difficult because I now have arthritis. It's like things accumulate. So I have swollen knees and elbows. I found yoga was far too stressful on my joints, and so I spent about a year going, oh no, I can't do my practice. And then I suddenly realised that there are other options. So I've been doing Tai Chi, which is much more gentle, and it doesn't involve stress on the joints in the same way. And it's rejuvenated me. I've only been doing it for maybe like 2-3 months, and it's made a huge difference re-engaging with that practice, partly to do with my teacher, who's very, very good indeed. So another example of ways that you can adapt your practice is I've got a friend, and he likes extreme exercise. He's always been really sort of like gung-ho, and he suffers from depression, and his exercise that he uses to get himself out of depression is uni-hockey, which is being on a unicycle and playing hockey at the same time, which cheers him up because it's really absorbing. You cannot enter the sort of the deep rut of depressive circles like that if you're trying to balance on a 36-inch wheel and hit the ball at the same time. However, he's strained his tendons, and so he can't do this anymore. And he's been resting, and he tries to re-engage with it. It's like, oh, he's a similar sort of age to myself. So he's now decided that kayaking is his new thing, because he can use his upper body for this. So as we age, even if we find a practice which suits us and which we can use to hopefully build our stamina and our heart rate and all those things, as we change and things limit us in one way, we can hopefully see, oh, I can change and do this other thing. And don't spend a year, like I did, going, oh, I can't do X, before we realise, oh, I could do Y instead. That's a tip I would like to pass on. And one of the things I like to do for today is to encourage people, like you're going to come across all sorts of talks during the next today and tomorrow, and also for the rest of your life. And you're going to remember things like the way that things were presented. You're going to remember some of the content that people said. Some of it won't stick particularly, but try and engage with the bits that you think are useful. Take those things and build them into your life. So rather than judging the talks and going, oh, that was interesting, that wasn't, which is some part of the reflection that you do, see what you can take and you can build yourself from this huge chaos of information and swirly things that are going to happen today and tomorrow. Have that sort of like, oh, that, be selective about what you, and try and relate it to things that are in your life so you can take them away and build it to yourself. My Tai Chi instructor, Ronald, says that the aims of Tai Chi are to live a long and productive life and then die quickly and easily without being too much of a problem for your family. And I like that philosophy. I think that's very good. No. And so yeah, the aim is to, you know, just gently keep doing things one day at a time. Do what you can. One of the things that also happens as we grow old, we accumulate our own sort of particular physical and emotional wounds, and then we try and adapt and tip the balance so that we can cope with those things. And one of the things that we accumulate is the knowledge of other people dying, people that are dear to us. I'm sure we've all had people that are dear to us die at various different points and pass on. When I was 7, I lived in a house where my grandparents lived as well. And I was very, very close with both of them. My grandmother, my nana, she taught me how to do sewing and embroidery, how to light a fire, how to do all sorts of different things, how to polish. She had a collection of brass animals that she had on her windowsill, like lizards and things like that. And once a week we would get the cloths out and polish them, and how to water plants so that they don't die, and all those kind of things. She taught me lots and lots of stuff. When I was 7, she died. And it was quite sudden. She went into hospital, and then she didn't come back again. I didn't get to see her in hospital. And it really affected me. And I was so sad that I decided not to remember her because it was too painful. And I'm sure that we've all had experiences that have touched us in a similar kind of way. I can remember her now because I've managed to sort of break through some of those things, which is very nice. Because it's nice to be able to remember the people. But even when I couldn't remember her directly, or my memories of her, I could still remember how to light a fire properly, how to clean things, how to water plants, how to embroider. And I had the physical things that she'd left to me in my life as well. And those things are as much her as the memory of her physical body. They're the way that she lives. And she got those things from people that she knew. And it's that kind of ancestral wisdom passing on. That's the things that are important to focus on as well. We can grieve the loss of the physical presence of somebody, of course, but we should also remember and try and eventually take comfort in those things that we still have. So the influence that lives on in us and then in our descendants, because I've passed on that knowledge to my children and they've taught it to their friends. And I'm sure you can all relate to that sort of pattern of how things go. And we can discover things ourselves and then pass those on. And those ripples spread throughout time and space. Often we don't know what the consequences of what we say or do are going to be. But we have to remember that those things will carry on after we've dropped this physical form. So one of the things that we have as human beings is this piece of knowledge that we will one day die. I'm not quite sure that many other animals have that awareness, certainly not in the same conscious kind of fact, kind of in front of them kind of way. There's an idea which is called terror management theory, is that right? Which I've become aware of recently, and it's the idea that because we know that we're going to die, we're terrified, and then we try and distract ourselves by doing other things so that we don't have to think about it. And that's what lots of the sort of religious structures of the world and things like that are designed to manage. Now, this is one theory, yeah, I can sort of see where they're coming from. But death doesn't fill me with terror. It obviously makes me sad at some points, but on the other hand, there are times in my life where I have just gone, oh, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, I'd be quite pleased because I'm really tired. I don't know if I can carry on. Oh. So when I do meet my death eventually, it will be something of a relief. So there's that to it. And what I'm trying to say is that there's ways of envisaging death which are not terrifying. And if you look at reports from near-death experiences and other sort of losses of awareness that people have, often when people go into that state of non-awareness, I am experiencing things, that can be quite a pleasant journey. And having had a couple of near-death type experiences myself, it was really nice. I just relaxed into this sea of warm support stuff. And the experience of losing yourself in that kind of way is not necessarily horrible. So what we can do to avoid this apparent sense of terror is the knowledge that we can, the experience itself is not necessarily painful. Lots of near-death experiences, people that have nearly drowned, all sorts of things like that, they have this thing. Which is not to say that that's the same for everybody, but it is possible to have that experience and for it not to be horrible. So the aim is to try and practice our death. One of the visualizations that I did for a while was, it's a Buddhist practice where you wake up in the morning and you face your death straight away to get it out of the way so you can get on with the rest of your day. And you face the reality of your death by sitting cross-legged, and then you imagine yourself burning up in a big flame. All of your body is on fire. It's all like disappearing, and it just exists as this flame, just disappearing, and there's nothing left but a pile of ash. That's it. And then you just sit with that, just for a very short time, maybe like a minute or two, maybe a bit more if you want to, but just meeting that one day I will not exist anymore, it will all be gone, all this form disappeared, I will just be ash. And then you get up and you get on with your day, but you've already faced that reality so that it doesn't shock you later on if something reminds you of your mortality or something like that. So you just keep that as a, yes, that's going to happen at one point. And you're not scared of it, it's not a distant thing. It's a bit like the Ancestor practice that I've heard of recently. So as we approach death, we think about ourselves as ancestors of the future. I heard of a really good ancestor work practice recently, which was the idea that in order to work with your ancestors, you should know them. So one of the things to mention first about ancestors is that you need to know who they are. Define what your ancestors are. Off track there. Oh, it isn't bad, but I haven't gone off track, it was in that place. So our ancestors are the people who biologically came before us, the ones that we choose to recognise as ones that we want to engage with, and also our cultural ancestors as well, so people that have done things that we've learned from before. And it's the same with people that come after us. Even those of us that don't have children will still have descendants, as it were, because we will speak to other people that are younger than ourselves. And one of the reasons to have this idea of ancestors and descendants is that it then allows us to work with traumas that cross generations. I think, looking around the room here, that the vast majority of us are from Europe, and my father was born just before the Second World War started, and all of us are quite close biologically to that deeply traumatic event. And then there's all the other sort of things that have been happening over the last 100 years further afield in the world, in the continent of Africa, the continent of America and South America. There are huge, huge wounds there with traumas, a lot of which have their basis in the movement of people from a landscape that they would have lived in into towns and being dragged across the world by other people as well. And all of that has deeply upset a lot of the sense of us being firm about where we are and knowing our place in the world. We've been really shaken up by that. So even as individuals, we feel, oh, my life's going quite well. That still exists for us as a culture, and we all share the responsibility of trying to do something to heal those wounds. And one of the ways that we can directly engage with this, because I can't suddenly make Brazil better, but one of the things that I can do is that I can engage with my ancestors, and I can chat with them. If I was asking for help from somebody, I wouldn't go up to somebody that I never speak to and go, oh, can you help me to do this? I would choose somebody that I have a good relationship with, that I know from frequent visits to them, frequent talking. So the practice of ancestor work that I heard about recently was the idea that, and it's not that unusual, but you have like a small shrine where you might have photographs, or even just one photograph of a particular ancestor that you've known yourself to some degree. I would use my grandma for this. Have a photograph of them, maybe have an item of which was theirs, or something which reminds you of them, or think of a food or a drink that they particularly liked and bring that to them, and just do this once a week, or however often you would go and visit somebody. So it's like, oh, it's Saturday, I'll go and have a cup of tea. And you just go there for half an hour, just engage with that person, just with their spirit, and just talk with them, tell them what's been going on for you, listen to what they might have to say to you. And then by building up this relationship over time, deeper things will start to come through, different perspectives. And I'm sure as magicians, where we're used to working with spirits and different deities, trying to pull this memory, this sort of working with people that have passed beyond, is a fairly achievable thing to do, especially on this sort of level, because it's not spooky, it's quite a sort of convivial thing to do. It's like sitting down, having a cup of tea, and just being engaged and remembering that the people in the past were alive like we are now, and that people in the future will be alive like we are now. I've got quite a lot of notes here, but I'm going to sort of like go through this a bit faster now. Hopefully with some interesting tips. So, one of the things we can do as magicians is that we can direct our attention to that which needs it. We can imagine ourselves as existing outside of time. So I can pretend in my head, I can imagine that there's the future and the past. It's all like laid out there in the timeline visualization, which is it's an NLP technique. Dave Lee has taught this to me. And so we see our lives as a line. There's like glowing tendrils. And I can step out of it, like I'm sort of now somewhere in the middle of it, hopefully. There's a lot from the future as well as in the past. So I can see myself down there, there's my timeline, and there's all these sort of tendrils of potential futures going off into the distance. And I can look at myself from beside, I can step outside of where I am now, and I can look at myself now as if I'm somewhere else, I'm outside of time, and I can look at that position of where I am in my life, and I can go, oh, you know, when you have that nostalgia about things that have happened in the past, and you look back at yourself and you go, your photos of yourself, and you go, oh, I looked really hot back then in those jeans. That was amazing. I can't believe I had a figure like that. I didn't appreciate it at the time. Good grief. And I know that if I look at myself now, from the perspective of me 30 years from now, I'll be going, blimey, look at her. She was amazing. She had dark hair. Gosh. Etc., etc. So you can artificially induce that nostalgia into yourself for the now, which is a thing that Lionel Snell has tried to encourage people to do. And it's a really interesting practice. He teaches it as like the alchemy of nostalgia, where you like use that nostalgic kind of, oh, I remember when, but you do it about now, and it's a really interesting way of looking at your life. Have a go at it. It's an interesting thing to do. So as we age and we gain experience, our repertoire of what we can do is enhanced. We've learned different things, we've seen different meditation techniques, we've learned all different body practices, and we've got to know the names of all different archangels and demons and different gods of obscure Ukrainian countries, etc., etc. So we've got all of this huge thing, and we can be quite selective about with things that we like, that we want to use, that we know are effective for us. We gain in confidence, and so we're prepared to give things a go, which we might not have done if we were younger. We learn practical tips from the magicians around us, like how to get wax out of candlesticks. And you know, it's like trying to dig it out. It's like what you do, yeah. So you get, as long as it's like not wood or something, but if it's metal, get some boiling water, pour it in, melts the wax, comes out. Brilliant. Or if you've got wax on the altar cloth because you've blown the candle out too enthusiastically rather than snuffing it, which you should have done with that wet fingers so you don't burn your fingers, So if you've blown it out and it's spattered across things, you go, oh God. So to get it out, you put some brown paper on it, iron it, and it lifts the wax out, etc. So those kind of practical tips we learn as we get older as well. We were thinking making a website with a page of all these different things, as sort of practical, handy tips. So, but the important thing is the shared knowledge. That's the message that I'm trying to get across by those quite comedic examples, is the way that as a community of practice, however loosely that is, it's not like it has to be like a questions later. It's not like it's it has to be a formal sort of order that you're part of. You can learn from anybody that's in the occult community, all sorts of different things. So make sure you ask questions and listen to the answers. It's really important to do that, and also share your knowledge that you've accumulated as well, because by doing that we can progress so much faster and with such much bigger knowledge. The way that we have stories that we can tell of things that happened. I've got very, very close friends that are magicians who are 20 years older than me, and sort of within that range as well. And I've got very close friends in the magical community that are 20 or even 30 years younger than me. And I don't treat them in a sort of familial way. I don't feel like a child of the people that are older than me, and I certainly don't feel like a mother to the people that are younger than me. They are my friends, they just happen to be a different age. But I think that it's really nice to be able to have that, and having the excuse of, I'm a magician, I'm an occultist, gives you reason to engage with these people on a different level to when you're just like walking down the street or in a shop or a business kind of relationship, because you're talking about things that are much more meaningful. And while you're getting these interesting tips about how to get wax out of robes or whatever it might be, you can also share stories of things that happened and life experience, and what life was like back in the day. The animals were bigger, easier to hunt. So you can get all of that kind of experience and then pass things on as well from your own life and from things that you've learned from there. And it makes that, if you have that connection with, I heard this from this person in the past, and then you tell it to someone much younger, then they have only one person between themselves and something that might have happened many decades before they were born. It makes it much more vivid, much more alive for them. And I think that that's really vital. The fact that we can really perceive the future as a visceral reality is what's missing an awful lot from the world at the moment. I think it would solve a lot of problems, or go away to motivating to solve those problems if we have that. So something that we should also consider about putting effort into is the way that, what kind of an old person do you want to be as you become nearer to death? As we grow older, we tend to become more like ourselves. We should establish habits which will serve us well into the future. A good practical example of this is that recently a retreat that we did, in fact earlier this year, a retreat that we did at St Nectan's Glen. I told the people that were coming there to bring a stick with them, and the reason for that was that the terrain there, it's like in a valley in Cornwall, and the ground is quite sort of like this, quite a lot of it. So I thought it would be really useful if people had some kind of stick, even if you don't usually need one. It can be a nice thing to have as staff. So I said to them, right, you're all being pilgrims, you're coming to this site, you need to bring a pilgrim staff, because as a pilgrim in the past you would have had a really good walking stick to help you on your way, a stout pole. So I told them all to bring one, and they did. And more than one of them, at the end of it, said that it was really useful to have, because it was like a symbolic, obviously a wizard's staff, but then because they had it for that symbolic reason, they also found that it was really useful as a practical thing to get around the site. And one person had this amazing thing that was carved out of bog oak, which was just astounding, which had been given by King Arthur, a whole other story. And he said that he'd really enjoyed having it because it was like he had a friend with him, like a confidant, and he was like sort of telling the things, and it was just sort of there with him throughout all the different meditations that he did on the retreat. So although it started off being a sort of practical suggestion that then I framed as a magical intent, that then became a really good practical habit that people had this stick when they needed it, and then that turned back into being a magical ally for these people. So those things, that's an example of how, as magicians, we can adapt practices that we can then take advantage of as we grow older and hopefully wiser. was talking to somebody about this, and they said that an important thing to remember is, as we get older, we come into the autumn of our lives and we fruit, which I was like, that's a bit strange, but I kind of get the gist of it, which is that we produce things, we start to see what we've made come out and fall to the ground, and hopefully set seed for new things to arise. So that's another way of thinking of things as well. And as we get older, we see the wheel of the year turn again and again and again. And as Samhain comes round again, we remember that time of the year, and the way that the quality of the light becomes really ethereal, and the importance of, we remember how important it is to have a good store of fuel so that we can be warm through the winter. We can anticipate the joy of the spring and the summertime, even from quite far in advance. It doesn't take us by surprise in the same way. So that's something that we can savour as we get older. Something that we can't so much cope with, certainly for me is proving difficult, is a lack of sleep. I was talking to Dax this morning, and he was also going, as I get older, I just can't sleep anymore. It's so elusive. Partly because you're sort of busy doing things, but your body just doesn't seem to want to be asleep in the same kind of way. Certainly my hormones at the moment are just making me really hot at night time, so it's keeping up. And I'm trying to sort of like make a story up to justify this. So I'm imagining that back in the day there I am in the sort of global village, and there's children that are sort of needing to be awake at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like, if I was there, then it would make complete sense that I was awake at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, or even 4. But because I'm not, it seems pointless. So I think some of the sort of the issues as we get older are to do with, like, that might be a made-up thing and might not have anything to do with why that happens, but it's an excuse that I can take comfort from. And a lot of what we do as magicians is to make up stories, to make our lives work better, to make ourselves happier in the world in some way. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So the other important thing that I wanted to mention here is about the idea of communities. Oh, and just quite quickly, I wanted to mention the idea of the 7 of Cups. So as we get older, life presents us with an abundance of possibilities, which in the 7 of Cups tarot card are represented by dragons and towers and all sorts of bizarre things like that. But we can only hold on to so many things at once. By choosing one of those options that was in our dreams, all the others become non-existent anymore. But we have to do that in order to engage with at least one of them. One of my friends, who's one of my older friends, she said to me that when she got to 30, she realised that she'd never be an astronaut. But by letting go of that dream, she was able to focus on being a storyteller, which is what she is now. But if you continually go, but maybe I could be this, maybe I could be that, you end up not being anything. So yeah, communities. It's important to cast spells for the type of home, for the type of community, for the type of world that you want to live in as an old person. When you will be vulnerable, you will be unable to do things for yourself in the same kind of way as you can now. Think about that. Think about what you want to happen at that point. Who do you want to have around you? Who would you like to care for you? Try and make the world so that it leads towards that in some small way. Even the smallest thing that you can do to help towards that, collectively, if we move in that kind of way, it can happen. I know some people in America who have, a couple of friends of mine, and they're trying to persuade all their mates to move to the same city as them. So they're sort of setting up a community of magical practitioners that they want to have. And I've heard of an example in England where some old ladies decided to set up a co-housing project so that they could, and I've heard this from other people as well, they set up a community when they're sort of like in their 40s, 50s, and they set this up with the intention of all growing old together, which is a really beautiful thing to decide to do. We all don't like to think that we are the hero of our lives, and of course we are, but no hero exists without allies, helpers, and people around them. All of the fairy stories have a point where the hero is assisted by a strange animal or whatever it might be. So, and a lot of these things we can ritualise. I haven't had time to talk about that. But I would like to mention that one of the rituals that we all do all the time is the breathing. So one of the first thing that we do when we emerge at birth is we breathe in. And then the ritual that we all do throughout our entire lives is to breathe in and out, and in and out, and in and out. And the last ritual that we will ever do is to breathe out. The end.